and welcome to our English at Leeds Trinity podcast. I'm Eloise. I'm a final year student at Leeds Trinity. Today we have Rakaya.
Hello.
Yvonne.
Hello.
And I'm Richard Storer. I'm a lecturer in English at Leeds Trinity. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. And what we are thinking about today, we've reached the next letter in the alphabet in our podcast series. And so today's episode is entitled B is for Book. So our focus is going to be on books. And I just picked up from our library just now a book that was in the section for classroom resources to use in schools. And it's a book that has, for its title, I Am a Book, I Am a Portal to the Universe. That's its title. It doesn't say on the front who wrote it. It's just a statement in itself. The book as a portal to the universe. I guess that explains why, when we think about English, everybody is very much interested in books. That's, in a sense, what we're interested in, what books can do, isn't it? A portal to the universe. I've never heard that expression before, but you think that's sort of the kind of underlying idea why we all like books.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, it provides an escape. It's a look into other worlds. A look into other worlds. Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think that's the. I think most people who are involved in English would probably want to defend books.
Yeah.
On
that would be one of the ways they do it. It's interesting that portal is a very kind of, well, it's both a sort of very Harry Potter associated word, and it's a kind of digital sort of word, isn't it? Kind of.
I would say that portal always reminds me of transportation, to get from one place to somewhere else.
Yes.
So that's what it reminds me more of.
Yes. So it's about moving.
Yep.
Well, that in many ways is what we will, I think, be thinking about. I thought it might be quite interesting before we're going to go and think about one particular book that we've all been enjoying recently and can talk about. But it might be quite interesting to start just by talking about our relationship to books more generally and to the word book. So I was going to ask everybody, first of all, do you have a favourite book?
Should I go first?
Yes.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So my favourite book is The Starless Sea. It's written by Erin Morgenstern, and it's just a really dreamy book that I read quite recently, and I have not stopped thinking about it since I read it.
Right. So you've got a new favourite book, effectively.
Yes.
Not one that's been your favourite all your life. Right.
Yeah.
I think for me it changes, but one of my favourites at the minute, also by my favourite author, Natasha Pulley, is her most recent release, The Half-Life of Valerie Kay. It's speculative fiction, and it's set in the Cold War, and there's aspects of very real things that happened at the time, but it also follows a scientist who, upon his release from prison for the material that he used to publish, is thrown into this sort of underhanded, shady government project about radiation and just the war in general. And it's so interesting to me just how she weaves in these plots into a very, very real time period in history.
So that's a book that takes you back in time as well as to different things. Yeah. So in both those cases, that's the sort of portal to something else element coming in. Now, Eloise, do you have a book that you would say, this is my favourite book?
Yeah, it's going to sound a bit more basic in comparison to those two, but it's always been Pride and Prejudice, but I think my attachment just comes from that's what got me into reading.
Right.
That's what got me into literature, so it just holds a special place in my heart, I think. If somebody asks me about it, I'm like, oh my God, I love Pride and Prejudice so much.
Yeah, so it's a long-term...
it feels a bit sentimental, Yeah.
I'm going to add one more to the way of thinking about it. I've brought a book in which is it's a sort of second-hand, rather battered copy. We're all handling it rather gently. It's a collection of short stories published in the late 19th century, and why I like it, it's called 'Twas in Trafalgar's Bay. It doesn't even say who it's by. It just refers to the authors of another book and says it's by them. It's just, to me, it's an interesting object. So it's not, in the sense, my favourite read, but it is a book that I'm quite pleased to have. And that I sort of mention, I think, because it's got all kinds of interesting things, like an interesting picture on the front. And because it's a kind of cheap edition, it says on the spine how much it costs, 2 shillings. And then on the back is an advert for soap, with nothing to do with the book, but just all about a skincare product. So all those things make it sort of unique as an object that was kind of created in the 19th century. And so that I think is mentioned because it sort of reminds you that when we say book, we don't only mean the experience of reading something, but we also may have relationships with books in other ways that we just really value them as objects.
Yeah, I'm subscribed to Illumicrate, and it's a subscription box that they send you a book and other items every month, and they have really pretty editions with sprayed edges, nice illustrations, and I really, really enjoy having those because they just look nice as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I own a copy of Anne of Green Gables that was a gift from my parents to me when I was younger, and it was a collaboration with Pantone. And so all the covers of the books that came out at that time what looked like the little pieces of paper you're given at a paint shop to look at which shade of green you might want. And so all the front covers of those books were different shades of paint, and it looks like a paint strip. And so my copy of Anne of Green Gables has different shades of green in it because it was a collaboration with, I think, Penguin Random House at the time.
Oh,
and
I like that.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty.
It is. And I love the story itself, but it's more my sentimental attachment to it. And I love the way it looks. That was a gift that I still really do love the story.
Yeah. So we can relate to the story, and we can relate to the way the story's been packaged up, and both those kind of somehow come under the heading of book. I thought it might be quite interesting. The next thing I thought we might do is just think about other words in English for books. I think the word book is sort of all-purpose, isn't it? It can cover both the object and the experience of reading the text that's in there. But I'm just thinking, if you wanted to sort of talk about a book, but you wanted to introduce a bit of elegant variation into your discourse and not keep saying the word book, what other words in English are available that sort of mean more or less the same thing that you could use? We did a little bit of brainstorming about this earlier, so let's just see how many we can remember.
I would say my read, or my current read.
My read. Actually, from you saying that, I already said that in just what I was saying just now. It's a good one, isn't it? My read. So there you've taken the verb and turned that into your noun.
Yeah, publication.
Publication.
Yes, so an author may, or my most recent publication.
That emphasises the process, not of consuming it, which is read, but of it being created and printed.
I would say text.
Text.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the text, that's what the term we often use, isn't it?
Text.
I've got another one which would be monograph. That's a way of describing a book when often academics, they want you to know that they wrote the whole thing. They are the sole author of it, as opposed to books where lots of people are contributing. So my latest monograph is something that I think all academics dream of being able to say. Any others?
Yeah, work.
That works, isn't it?
Her latest work, or her most influential work.
Yes, work.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you there.
Edition or version.
Yeah.
If we're talking about specific.
And then I guess you're particularly kind of wanting to pick out things that are about that, like your edition of Anne of Green Gables. Yeah. It's got stuff that you can buy Anne of Green Gables in lots of different forms. That's a particular edition of it, isn't it?
Similarly, when it's either a US or UK version of a novel, you can see the little differences.
Yeah.
It's either edition.
Yeah. Any others?
Can't think of another one.
Tome, I think. We were thinking about tome.
Tome. Yes, I agree. That definitely does mean book, but it's not. What would you say are the connotations of tome?
We said like encyclopedias, or like old and official.
It reminds me of archaeology.
Yeah,
just a bit.
Again, like
feels
really
like
old and
you would find
official.
at an archaeological site.
Apparently, it is a word that does go back to the word, I don't know if it's Greek or Latin, for when you had a scroll.
Oh.
So it does mean potentially a really long piece of writing. And I don't think you would use it in a very positive sense, really.
Oh.
Nowadays, would you?
Oh,
You know,
yeah, no, yeah.
His latest tome sort of sounds a bit like
Long.
Long. Yeah, no one's going to read that. Yes, tome. There's a book I've just read recently. It's called Once Upon a Tome, and
Play on words.
yeah, play on words, and it is about someone who works in a second-hand bookshop or an antiquarian bookshop and deals with all these old books all the time. I think we're out. We've run out of our other terms. Are there any others that we can come up with? Let's shift then to thinking about the word book, finally, in terms of other languages. Between us, we can muster quite a few different languages, either that we know well or that we know a bit of. So, Yvonne, start with you. Was Spanish is your first language?
Yeah, Spanish is libro, and similarly, I think it relates to all the other Romance languages, livre in French, and and I think it's libro in Italian as well. So,
right.
And then Russian kniga.
Right. So that has absolutely no resemblance to the Romance version.
No. And in Malay is buku.
Oh.
So it comes from the English, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know that the word book, it comes not from the Romance languages, but from the Germanic family of Indo-European languages. So you get a lot of other ones like that in German and in Scandinavian languages. It seems like the Malay version has picked up from the English.
Yeah, through I think the colonial period.
Right. The only other one I know is in Welsh it is llyfr, and that is obviously borrowed from the Latin as well. And I think you were saying you know the
Irish Gaelic. I'm sorry to my boyfriend for the horrible pronunciation of this now, but Laur, I think.
Yeah.
Right. And when you see it spelled, it's obviously got a relationship with these other.
Yeah,
ones.
There's the EABH, and that, so it kind of looks. Is it Germanic or Romantic?
Romance.
Yeah.
Yes. So that lib root is the same in all of those. So now, Ruqayyah, you are kind of bilingual in English and another language, and Sinhalese.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's great. So what are we getting in terms of book in Sinhalese?
In Sinhalese, the word for book is poth. If I were to spell that, it would be P-O-T-H. Poth.
Right.
And I also frequently use the Arabic word, which is kitab.
Right.
And it's interesting because the word itself for book, when you say to read, it's uktub, or bookshop is maktaba. So it's all relating back to that one word for book.
Right. Okay, so we've got quite a variety there of different words. Some interesting kind of borrowings, and some where it's totally different.
Yeah.
Different word. The reason we're thinking about how you can say book in different ways, and then how you can say it in different languages, that just leads us on to the book that I want us to talk about today, which is Babel, An Arcane History, by R.F. Kuang. Now, this is a book that I didn't know before the start of this year, but I think Ruqayyah has kind of introduced it into the into the community. Ruqayyah recommended it to Yvonne. Yvonne has mentioned it to me. I then went and read it. I know several colleagues who've also read it this year. So it's one that's come into our awareness, and it's absolutely fascinating. But the first thing that we're going to think about, though, in relation to this is how do we pronounce the title? It's Babel, and I look at that and immediately I've always pronounced that word Babel. But if we just go back, as we always should, to the Oxford English Dictionary for any questions about words, we've actually, as often there, we've got recordings of different pronunciations, and Eloise is just going to play us those.
So this is the British one.
Babel.
And then
Babel.
that's the American. But then there's also
Babel.
Babel.
Right. Okay, yeah. So we can... now, I think you're pronouncing it Babel all the time, aren't
Yeah,
you?
it's
Yvonne?
what I hear on TikTok a lot.
Right.
I hear babble.
I
Right.
just heard it from an interview with the author herself, and
Right.
she said Babel.
She said
so
Babel as
I
well.
just stuck with it.
Okay. So either is completely fine. And it's interesting, I guess when you say Babel, to me, that kind of immediately identifies the story with the Bible story of the Tower of Babel and the myth there. When you say Babel, then of course you kind of pick up resonances with other words for language and
Yeah.
babbling and so on. And I don't think in the end Babel and Babel are actually etymologically connected, but obviously it's an important extra kind of thing going on with them.
It's interesting because within the book itself, they're referred to as babblers. Anybody
Yes,
who studies
they
at
are.
the Royal Translation Institution, which was made for the book itself.
Yes, that's true. So Babel will do either. This is a book I really enjoyed reading, and I don't want our discussion to sort of give away any spoilers. But I think within that, perhaps you could both say a little bit about why you enjoyed reading it, what you liked about it. Yvonne, do you want to go first?
I quite like reading fantasy. It's my preferred genre, and but I quite liked how subtly it's included in this book, and also how it relates back. It sort of almost feels scientific in a way. They use silver, and that sort of feels almost like, there's a scientific method for the effects that it causes. So it feels it's fantasy, but it's still rooted in reality. I also lived in Oxford for 6 years, so it felt almost, I don't know, like reminiscent of my time there. It was a really interesting read.
Right. So we could say most of it is based.
Yeah.
Almost the entirety of it is based in Oxford, isn't it?
Yeah. Sure. And also, studying linguistics, the whole system of translation linguistics,
Yeah.
that feels really interesting.
Yeah.
So it was a really easy read in the sense of it was understandable what the book was trying to convey.
Yeah. So it's a book set in Oxford, set in a university basically, and it's a lot to do with languages. Do you want to say a bit more? I think
one of my favourite parts of just the book in general was the discussion of, it touched upon colonialism quite a bit, which was a pressing issue during the time that the students are going to the university. And I think it's really interesting because, unlike Yvonne, fantasy is not my preferred genre. I prefer historical novels. I like magic realism. And so this kind of hit all those boxes for me. And I really enjoyed how she, again, very subtly integrated the magic system within the existing frameworks of history, and how she drew from her own experience. The author drew from her own experiences of going to the university and experiencing what it was like to be there.
Yeah. That's something I must say I found very positive in reading it. It really conveys the sense of sort of joy and wonder, if you like, of going to an institution and being able to just learn and having the resources there. So it's that sort of living that kind of best life of a student and a learner, an academic.
It feels
really
like it was
across.
her passion project,
Yes.
because of how much she studied and how dedicated she is to the subjects that she's
Yes.
discussing, where she's studied linguistics and she's studied, especially translation was something that she was focused on when she was at university. So it was really interesting to see it come to life.
Yeah. So I think there's the university setting, the kind of the delight in the academic research, all the sort of delight in language, and as you say, also, Ruqayyah, there's the kind of colonialism element to it, and so perhaps the plot is sort of structured around they love being there, but at the same time they're kind of questioning the relationship of the institution to the way things that are going on in the world, and that's the kind of thing that drives the plot, which I won't go any further into, but we will now focus on what's a sort of brilliant idea that sustains that, which is the sort of fantasy element of the book that you've mentioned, Yvonne, the idea of silver having this kind of special power that comes from the untranslatability of words between languages.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think how to sort of describe it. We're not giving anything away here because the very first thing that happens in the book, more or less, is that the main character, Robin, is kind of healed or cured of illness by somebody coming in with a silver bar on which two words are described, and they are the same word in two different languages, essentially, aren't they?
Yeah.
And the difference between those two words, it's the word treacle, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you explain what the difference is between the two words?
I think that treacle was it French and English, if I remember correctly. And in English, it's obviously the sweet things of the syrup, and in French, it was sort of antidote or.
I think so, yeah. It was antidote. It was either French or Greek, I want to say.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I think it was Greek, I feel.
Yeah.
But
I think
again,
you're right, yeah.
it has been a minute since I reread that chapter.
Yeah. It has been a while.
It has been a while.
Yeah.
But it was antidote in one language and the sweet sort of thing that you eat in another.
So the brilliant idea that R.F. Kuang has had is to sort of imagine that if that difference between the two words, which in theory they translate into each other, but there's something is lost in the translation one way, or if you put it another way, something is gained when you translate the other way, that thing that is missing or that is gained can be kind of, somehow silver has the power to create that in the real world. I had a quote that sort of summarises it, I think. The power of the bar, the silver bar, lies in words. More specifically, the stuff of language that words are incapable of expressing, the stuff that gets lost when we move between one language and another. The silver catches what's lost and manifests it into being.
Yeah.
That's the kind of idea, isn't it? Which is such a clever idea because it generates so much potential for thinking about language, and then also thinking about exploitation as well, and colonialism. That it was a good one to have come up with, and I thought we could explore that a bit more by just thinking. Also, all through the book, this is another thing I think people really enjoy about it. There are all these explanations of words, aren't there?
Yeah.
So little kind of lessons really in the history of words. A lot of them Chinese words, so you kind of, you pick up things there, but also all different translations across the Indo-European language family. And so you get all these examples. I thought maybe what we could do would be just to kind of take off from that and think about our own awareness of words, which in theory could be used in the same way. If we were students or scholars in Babel, we could maybe develop a silver bar.
Yeah.
Knowing the meaning of two different words, the meaning of two words that have the same meaning in theory but don't. Untranslatable words, in other words. Let's just think about those. Who's going to go first?
I can
Yes,
go.
Yvonne.
Yeah, that's fine. So I've got two words. The first one is a word in Spanish, which is sobremesa. And
Can you say it again? So.
Yeah, the word is sobremesa. It's a fairly long word. What it means is the literal translation would be over the table. Sobre is over and mesa is table.
Right.
But what it describes is the act of sitting around a table, having a conversation after you've had food. So the plates are still on the table, you're just having a chat and you're sitting around. I'm not entirely sure how it could be used. It could be used maybe to foster conversation over food or something like that. But I guess you could do that. Yeah.
I can't think what where you would begin with what English word you could find that would sort of
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
close
trying
to
to
that.
think. I don't think it'd just be. Do you want to have a chat
Yeah.
after we've eaten?
You don't even ask it, right? Because it just happens.
Yeah,
It's
it just does a
It's a
natural
designated post-meal discussion.
Yeah. It's like what you were saying before, like it's such a natural thing that everybody does once they've finished eating. You might sit around with your family and just naturally start to chat. It's strange that there isn't an English word for that.
Yeah.
Everybody does it.
Well, I was convinced that other languages would have a word because I was like, well, it would be crazy that you didn't. Like, why wouldn't you? That's such a normal thing to do. But yeah, so that's the one. And the other word is a word in Finnish. And the reason I picked a word in Finnish is because I actually have it tattooed on my wrist. The word is sisu. And sisu is character trait. It can be a positive or a negative trait. it's mostly used positively, but with some connotations of stubbornness. And what it means, I got a definition from the internet, so I could cover all the meanings. It says stoic determination, tenacity of purpose, grit, bravery, resilience, and hardiness. So it covers a lot of different traits, but you couldn't really just translate that into a single English word. It is considered untranslatable, and it is considered as a trait that all Finnish people either have or strive to have.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, resilience is a word we often hear in the kind of student context, isn't it? It's something
Yes.
you want students to develop. So we're sort of saying that sisu is that plus more.
Yeah, plus extra, like it's like hardiness, and it's like that stoic determination. It's not really complaining about it. It's just having
Carrying
tenacity.
on.
Yeah,
Just being able to push through.
Yeah, so there's not really
Push
a
through.
single word
Yeah.
that would contain the entirety of that definition, but I think that there are several words. So this is one that you could actually
Yeah.
put on a silver bell, because
Yes.
it would always have missing
Right.
information if you translated
Yes. So if you did that, then the person on the receiving end would have probably be more resilient.
it. Right, yes,
Or
yes.
more than just resilient. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, shall we think about words that are translate or untranslatable between Sinhalese and English?
I actually just thought of one when we were thinking.
Oh, great.
Just as I was listening to Yvonne tell us about these words. There's a Sinhalese word, bokka, which, when translated literally, it means to dent something, or if there's a bend, or if something is out of shape. But used in the language when we're speaking, it means a friend who's so close to your heart that they've made a dent in it.
Oh.
That's cute.
So it's beyond a best friend or beyond someone that you just have loyalty to. This is someone you would do absolutely anything for. And it's a word, but it's almost always platonic.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no romantic connotation to it. It's a very platonic word, and it's something that just means a friend that you just care that much for, that they've quite literally dented your heart.
That's so nice.
And it's very much a word that, if you say, I suppose, best friend in English, it just doesn't kind of capture the amount of feeling behind the word. And there's a literal translation, but nobody necessarily uses it to mean that. It's always in this context.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So it's a much sort of stronger
It is.
bond, really,
Yeah.
than just friend or best friend. Oh, that's a lovely one, isn't it? Okay, yeah, right. And did you have another one?
I also thought, again, there's a lot of words that come from friendship or from very much appreciating another person, and it's ambayalua, which, this is a bit of a longer one. It's two words that are put together, and it means mango friend. And it comes from the idea that in a past life you would have shared a mango together and you would have split the fruit. And it's people that, no matter at what point you meet in life, you meet people who you might have known previously, and they're your mango friends, ambayalua.
Like the people that feel that you've known forever after
Forever,
you've spoken to for
even
like
if
10
you've had
minutes.
just one conversation with them,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ah, I see. So it's not about a past life, it's about just earlier in your life.
It's both. It's
Oh,
both.
I see.
Because it
Right.
connects back to Buddhism and the idea of reincarnation.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So in that, I mean, I don't particularly like mangoes, I've got to say. but it's sort of implying that the mango is a real sort of thing that people bond over, isn't
Mostly,
it?
I think it's because in Sri Lanka and a lot of the times in South Asia, mangoes are one of the more popular fruits, just
Right.
being a tropical country. And so it's something that you sit together and you share with family and friends, especially in the hotter days of summer when you're all just outside and you're melting and you want like a refreshing fruit to eat. I think that's a lot where it comes from.
And then,
Yeah.
and then you have soda mesa right after.
You're right after, yeah. Look at
Bring
that.
those two. So, I mean, I suppose trying to think what would be the English. So, drinking buddy maybe is kind of a little bit the sort of idea.
Potentially, but it usually would be applied to like children as well. So I
Right.
don't think drinking
Yeah,
would
no.
quite work, unfortunately. But I understand, yeah.
Right. So there's two words there that are like really,
Just-
really powerful words to describe friendships, aren't
Yeah.
they? Yeah, that's great. So, Eloise, you've got one from Irish, I think.
Yeah, so the word she, it's spelled S-I with a fodder, or like an accent, and then DH. So you'll know it from the word banshee, which is like a mythical creature. A lot of untranslatable words from Irish Gaelic come from folklore.
Yes.
So she means a hill or a mound where a mythical creature may live. So then in terms of like banshee, ban is a woman. So it'd be a mythical woman that lives in a mound.
Right. Right. Yeah, so it's that kind of landscape feature is what the word refers to.
Yeah, just maybe it comes from like mothers being like, oh, don't play around there. That's where the banshees are.
Yeah. So it is hard to think of an English equivalent of that, isn't it? The word that's coming to my mind is barrow. It's in that sort of traditional word that means a sort of the remains of an old tomb or something like that.
Okay.
You know, a mound that had some kind of burial in it. Barrow. I think it was really kind of relaunched by Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings because there's things called barrow wights that live in these things.
Okay.
So no doubt Tolkien, being such an avid collector of languages, he was probably going back to that idea that you were talking about of the kind of person who lives in the spooky hill. But certainly there. Otherwise, there's no other word I could think of that has got that kind of sense of potential, like Gothic kind of.
It is a little bit,
potentiality in it. So that's an interesting one. And the one I was thinking of is one that actually it sort of picks up from our previous episode I was talking about when we were talking about Old English, and it's a difference between two words that are the same, but in Old English it means one thing, and in modern English it's taken on the other. So in the previous episode I talked about the word weensad in Old English, which literally means when you have had enough wine. Satiated with wine, it literally means. Now, when I saw that, and in fact when we were doing the previous episode, I was quite enthused. I thought that meant, you've had enough wine and you feel sad.
That's what I thought.
Sort of kind of melancholy, which is a great idea. But if you look up the word sad in the Old English dictionaries, in the Bosworth Toller, for example, they're very clear that in the Anglo-Saxon period, sad did not have the connotations that it means now. It didn't have that sense of being mournful, and in fact they had, if you look it up in the thesaurus of Old English, they had lots and lots of words for that. It wasn't that they didn't do sadness, they definitely did, but sad was not their word for it. They had 20, 30 other words that could convey that. Okay. But the word sad meant to them satisfaction, had enough, and it's related to the Latin word satis. So it's about having had enough.
Okay. Is it spelt the same, sad?
Well, yes. It's spelt with the different letter A, the A. That we did a separate episode on. So in Old English, sad means enough. It's to do with satisfaction or having had enough. And then it seems that lots of languages across Europe have got the same thing in them, especially Latin with all words of satisfaction. But only in English has sad then kind of moved on to its main meaning now, which is sorrowful and sadness.
That's so interesting, because if you would have told me just the word sad, I would have assumed it's a Germanic language, so it's a word that comes from Germanic root, simply because it's quite short and it sort of feels like that. But telling me it comes from Latin is so interesting.
Yes, I think I think probably what I would have to modify it slightly and say, because I think it is found in Germanic languages as well.
Yeah.
So I think the idea is the Latin word and the Germanic words all come from the same Indo-European root. I think that's the sort of idea. But everywhere else they have this idea of enough.
Yeah.
Just like we still have the word satisfaction.
Yeah.
But in English it's taken on this other meaning. And I never would have thought before today that sad and satisfaction actually had
a common
ancestry. So if we were thinking in terms of Babel, then what you might be able to do is have a silver bar in which the Old English word sad is on one side and the modern English word sad is on the other side. And if you use it the right way around, the person who's feeling sad and mournful, when you then use the bar on them, they actually change their feeling of feeling melancholy to feeling more kind of satisfied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but it also reminds us maybe that the feeling of having had enough also perhaps sometimes does bring with it the feeling of
Yes.
sadness. I've had enough, so that's over now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
So it's kind of poised like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've collected there quite a
Yes.
true to the idea of Babel and Babel, which is about lots of different languages.
Yeah.
We've actually explored quite a lot of different languages and evidence from them, and this idea of untranslatability, which I think we all agree, and I think R.F. Kuang sort of agrees as well, that there's something valuable in the differences.
Yes.
I think one of my favourite quotes from the book itself is, an act of translation is always an act of betrayal, because you're
Right.
not necessarily able to ever fully capture what one language may be trying to say
Yeah.
and translate it into something that everyone might understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's sort of betrayal, but it's also a kind of exploration.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's great. So thank you very much, everyone, for exploring that with us and for all your different linguistic contributions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can find out more about English at Leeds Trinity from our Leeds Trinity University website at www.leedstrinity.ac.uk, and also from our at Leeds Trinity channel on YouTube, and from our Twitter account at LTU English. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Steve Oxton and Thessalianstudios.com for this music, which is called Rio After Dark.